Is there a specific type of drones or models or something you're looking for in order to actually be able to do these?
Yes, thermal cameras are different than your normal regular RGB visual cameras. Typically speaking, with a thermal camera, it's going to look like it has a mirrored coating on it. And the thermal plus visual data are going to be necessary so that those thermal drones have both your thermal camera and also your RGB visual data or camera next to it. The thermal camera, as far as the at least minimum requirements, needs to at least have a 640 by 512 resolution. Those are your newer ones like the DJI Mavic 3T, Matrice 4T that just came out. Alltel has one, and the Skydio X10. The other side of it is it would be definitely better to have RTK so that you can actually have a centimeter level accuracy for where the drone is in position comparatively to the surface of the roof.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to see a broad temperature detection range between -20 and 500 degrees on the Celsius side. Basically, we want to have a highly sensitive, less than or equal to 50 micrometers as far as your sensitivity for the thermal camera. Those would be the minimum specs. As new technology comes out, there will be better specs coming out. But this also goes into the emissivity, the humidity, and the distance to the surface that you're flying at, and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And something else to take notice of, the Mavic 3 thermal, yes, it has a thermal camera and it's a great thermal camera, but the RGB camera that goes along with it is actually not a good quality camera. And so we exclusively use Mavic 3 series of drones for our RGB, our visual spectrum modeling, just because we can have really good comparison photos to going back and forth from. But if you use your Mavic 3 thermal as a mapping drone to get the actual RGB side, it doesn't look nearly as crisp, and you're going to have a lot of lost details that are very critical on actually doing those minute inspections. So for us, for instance, we actually
Right.
do two different flights. We do one during the daytime using a high quality mapping drone that's made for visual spectrum imaging. And then we also do one at night for thermal imaging. So it's actually two different flights, two different drones. Merge everything together to get the highest level detail. And if you're not doing these steps, like you're severely missing out, and you're probably missing things that you shouldn't unless you actually did it correctly. So,
Right. The visual cameras on the Mavic 3T, the thermal, are more for verification on the thermal side when you're doing that thermal inspection versus, say, mapping, where we use the Mavic 3E with the 4/3 inch visual sensor. And the thermal does also have a 7 times zoom so that you can be a little bit further away, but then also, okay, if this is a hot spot, what is that hot spot? If you have the visual light to inspect that. But yes, as far as what we're providing for the customer, for the end product, we're using an entirely secondary visual camera just so that the visual side is the best that we can provide on top of the thermal cameras, which is the best of what we can provide right now.
yeah, there's other challenges as well when it comes to doing these sort of things. There's so many variables going into this, and I know you mentioned the RTK. Having RTK enabled does absolutely help with model generation and making sure that everything stitches correctly. Thermal imaging specifically is actually very hard to get enough overlap sufficiently and to generate a properly looking model. It's significantly harder to do mapping with a thermal drone than a standard camera. It's a much different. There's also other things as well with surface to takeoff altitude, as far as how far above the structure you are. You have a lot of calculations that the drones will do, but they're assuming you're on ground level. But if you're flying a structure, you actually have to do additional calculations to make sure that you're mapping at the correct height and still getting enough overlap for it. So there are so many things that go into this, and I see a lot of people really mess this up. And so you really need to have someone who knows what they're doing if you want to provide those high quality deliverables. And if you don't, if you go cheap and you just don't do it the right way, it's not going to work. And you're going to miss a lot of opportunities.